At least 20 people have been killed in Lebanon in the latest explosions involving communication devices belonging to Hezbollah militants. Ambassador Rami Mortada, Ambassador of Lebanon to the United Kingdom, is with us. Hello, Your Excellency. Thanks very much indeed for joining us on the programme. Saudi Arabia's ambassador to the UK has warned that the Middle East is the closest it's been to regional war in 50 years. What's your view?
Indeed, he's right. I think Israel managed these recent days to reach a new ethical low through committing another war crime. This simultaneous and indiscriminate targeting of civilians, and it doesn't matter whether they're members of an armed group or civilians, amounts to a war crime according to the United Nations, because they did not have prior knowledge of the location of who was using these devices and of the surrounding of the devices, and yet they detonated 5,000 devices in Lebanon, which killed children, civilians, and people not associated with Hezbollah.
How surprised were you that they managed to carry out, supposedly Israel, we don't know, they haven't accepted it, a second attack within 24 hours?
Obviously, this is a very sophisticated intelligence operation, and this is typical pattern, behavioral pattern of Israeli warfare tactics. They've done it in the past. They've done similar war crimes in the past, and here they are doing it again and putting the region at the brink of an all-out war, which we have been trying to avoid for a year now. Unfortunately, we're faced with an Israeli prime minister who wants to put his country at a continual state of war to put off the risk of the fall of his coalition and facing corruption charges at court. So the whole region is hostage to Mr. Netanyahu's political fate.
Every single day missiles are fired by Hezbollah, though, into Israel, aren't they? Israelis not safe in their own homes. What can be done to try to stop that?
Exactly. We have to reverse this trend and de-escalate. The mediators, mainly the Americans, were heavily mobilized, and we were all looking forward for these negotiations on a ceasefire in Gaza in order for immediately and simultaneously start on a de-escalation scheme on the southern borders of Lebanon. And the signs were promising in that regard, but unfortunately the Israeli government is doing its utmost to undermine the ceasefire negotiations in Gaza through expanding the war and putting the whole region on the brink of an all-out war, which will spare no one. Everyone will be hurt in such a war.
So what can politicians and diplomats like you do to try to stop Hamas retaliating for what's happened?
Remain focused on the ceasefire negotiations in Gaza and in parallel and simultaneously work on a de-escalation scheme in Lebanon. The Lebanese government does not want war. We have been for a year now heavily mobilized to try to avoid what we're seeing today. But it needs cooperation from the other side. And as I said, we don't see the Israeli government ready for such de-escalation. It's rather the opposite. They are doing their utmost to involve new stakeholders in this conflict, and that's pretty worrying.
You accept, though, that Israel has been provoked?
Has been provoked? Well, it has been. How do you explain the more than 40,000 innocent civilians killed in Gaza?
I'm referring specifically to bombs being lobbed across the border every day.
No one has admitted what happened on October the 7th, but this should have been an occasion for modesty, an occasion to work for peace in the region. Unfortunately, Israel took a totally different turn, and here we are faced with a regional war. That's why efforts should be focused on de-escalation, efforts should be focused immediately on a ceasefire in Gaza and subsequently on a de-escalation scheme in Lebanon.
And the hostages returned?
It's part of the negotiations.
Do you think the Islamic Revolutionary Guard will get involved, respond as a result of what's happened over the last 48 hours?
Well, if things go the way they're heading, I think we have the risk of an all-out war in the region. I hope not. We have been working tirelessly in order to avoid such a situation. But as I said, it needs Israeli cooperation.
It's said that the ceasefire is 90% there. So what's stopping it?
I'm not aware of the exact details of the negotiations, but we see a pattern in Israel in trying to undermine this process, because once they stop the war, there will be implications for the ruling coalition inside Israel, which explains why the process is stalled.
Going back to the walkie-talkies and the pages that have exploded, claiming lives and injuring many thousands of people. We've been talking to a former senior Israeli intelligence official who told us the explosions may have just been a warning shot, and if saying, let's stop here, no more bombs from your side of the border, Hezbollah. You're going to have to, politicians in Lebanon are going to have to step in, aren't they, to try to make sure that this doesn't escalate. You have a responsibility to do that as much as both sides need to cool their jets.
We have stepped in a year ago trying to de-escalate the situation, trying to negotiate some sort of an arrangement through a third party, which is the United Nations. But again, as I said, it needs Israeli cooperation. The Israelis have been having a very provocative pattern of behavior towards Lebanon, targeting journalists, targeting civilians, targeting deep down into Lebanese territory. We have to reverse this trend and come back to normalcy and quietness at the border. And we have the ingredients for that. We have a United Nations Security Council Resolution 1701, which includes all the parameters for such a de-escalation arrangement. And we have a UN force, UNIFIL, which also could be playing a vital role in this scheme.
You were a bit dismissive of Benjamin Netanyahu when you were referring to him a few moments ago. What is the relationship like between your two governments at the moment?
Obviously, we are in a state of war. Legally, we are in a state of war with Israel, and but again, we're also part of the large Arab position which subscribed to the Arab Peace Initiative, which was actually issued in the Beirut summit in 2002, which talks about land for peace. Once Israel abides by the international obligations and implements all the Security Council resolution related to the Arab-Israeli conflict, then all Arab countries, according to what this initiative said, would be ready to pursue normal relations with Israel. The next day of the adoption of this initiative, Israel at the time launched a war against Jenin refugee camps and committed the atrocities at the time.
But violence, as we all know, doesn't end wars. You get to peace by talking. Are you talking to Israel?
Indirectly through the Americans.
And how's that going?
We have a promising package, as I said, de-escalation package at the border, but it needs for a regional conducive atmosphere, mainly a ceasefire in Gaza, because you wouldn't expect that Lebanon engages as long as the situation in Gaza is what it is and atrocities are being committed.
And you feel that if Benjamin Netanyahu was not in power, then you may be in a very different situation?
I cannot speculate, so I judge what I see. I see a dwindling ruling coalition in Gaza, in Israel. And I've always said it's Netanyahu is like riding a bicycle. The moment he stops, he would fall. So he needs to put his country continuously on a path of war and violence, because the moment he stops, he would face the consequences internally.
And what's your message to the Israeli people?
If you want peace, you have to work for peace. You have to elect officials who respond to peace initiatives. The Arab, since 2002, have chosen peace as a strategic objective. Unfortunately, no response from the other side.
It's good of you to take the time to join us. We very much appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.